You're sitting across from her at a dimly lit coffee shop, conversation flowing naturally, when suddenly she does something that most men completely miss. She reaches across the table, and in that split second, everything changes. What happened next wasn't just coincidence, it was her body screaming a message that 99% of guys never decode. This isn't about her hand, her shoulder, or even her face. It's something far more intimate, far more revealing. And when you understand what I'm about to share with you, you'll never look at female attraction the same way again. The crazy part? This specific body part reveals more about her feelings toward you than 1,000 words ever could. And science backs this up in ways that will blow your mind. Before we dive deep into this psychological revelation that could transform your dating life forever, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to learn isn't taught in school, isn't discussed in polite conversation, and could be the missing piece you've been searching for. Now, let me tell you exactly what this body part is and why it matters more than you ever imagined. Let me take you back to a moment that changed everything I thought I knew about attraction. I was 24, sitting in a psychology lecture at university, when Professor Dr. Sarah Mitchell dropped a bombshell that made the entire auditorium go silent. She explained that human touch carries more psychological weight than verbal communication, and that women, in particular, have invisible boundaries around specific parts of their bodies that they only lower for men they've already decided they trust on a deep, primal level. The body part she was referring to? The lower back. Yes, you heard that right. The lower back. Not her hand during a handshake, not her arm during a casual touch, but that specific area just above the hips, below the shoulder blades, that sacred territory that represents vulnerability, trust, and sexual attraction, all rolled into one powerful signal. But wait, because it gets even more interesting when you understand the psychology behind why this matters. The lower back is neurologically connected to some of the most sensitive and intimate parts of the female body. When a woman allows you to touch her lower back, whether it's guiding her through a doorway, during a slow dance, or even just a casual moment of connection, she's giving you access to a zone that evolutionary psychology tells us is reserved for potential mates, not random strangers. Dr. Mitchell explained that day how this area triggers the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and creates a feedback loop of attraction that deepens with every touch. Think about every romantic movie you've ever watched. When does the man place his hand on the woman's lower back? During moments of intimacy, protection, and connection. Hollywood accidentally stumbled onto something that psychologists have known for decades. Now, you might be thinking, is this really that big of a deal? Or are you exaggerating? Let me answer that with a study that will make you reconsider everything. Researchers at the University of Oxford conducted an experiment where they measured women's comfort levels with touch in different body zones. What they discovered was fascinating and counterintuitive. While hands and arms were considered neutral territory that could be touched by acquaintances, friends, and strangers without much psychological significance, the lower back fell into a category reserved almost exclusively for romantic partners and close family members. In the study, women reported feeling vulnerable, exposed, and intimate when men they barely knew attempted to touch their lower back. But when men they were attracted to did the same thing, they described feeling protected, desired, and safe. The difference? The emotional connection and attraction that already existed beneath the surface. Here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing, and this is something most dating coaches won't tell you because they don't understand the neuroscience behind it. When you touch a woman's lower back, you're not just making physical contact, you're tapping into her limbic system, the primitive part of her brain responsible for emotions, memories, and sexual attraction. This area of the brain doesn't process logic or reason. It operates on instinct and feeling. According to research published in the Journal of Neuroscience, touch in intimate zones like the lower back activates the same neural pathways as kissing or more intimate physical contact. In other words, when she lets you touch her lower back, her brain is already categorizing you as someone in her romantic sphere, not her friend zone. This is why you'll notice that women will physically recoil or create distance if a man they're not interested in tries to touch their lower back. But they'll lean into it, relax, and even reciprocate when it's someone they're attracted to. Let me paint you another picture to drive this home. Because understanding the theory is one thing, but seeing how it plays out in real life is what really matters. I have a friend named Marcus who struggled with dating for years. Nice guy, decent looking, good job. But he could never tell if women were actually interested in him or just being polite. One evening, we were at a social gathering, and he was talking to a woman named Jessica. They'd been chatting for about 20 minutes, laughing, making eye contact, all the usual signs that things were going well. I watched from across the room as Marcus did something I'd coached him on. As they walked toward the bar together, he gently placed his hand on her lower back to guide her through the crowd. Jessica's response was immediate and unmistakable. She didn't pull away, didn't stiffen up, didn't create distance. Instead, she leaned slightly into his touch, smiled wider, and moved closer to him. That single moment told Marcus everything he needed to know. 3 months later, they were in a relationship. But here's the critical part that separates men who understand this from men who misuse this information. This isn't a manipulation tactic or some kind of trick to force attraction where none exists. This is about reading signals and understanding what's already happening beneath the surface. If a woman doesn't want you touching her lower back, she will make it crystal clear through her body language, her words, or by physically moving away. The power of this knowledge isn't in the touching itself. It's in the permission she grants you to enter that intimate space. That permission is the real indicator of attraction, trust, and romantic interest. When she allows it, welcomes it, or even initiates opportunities for it, that's when you know you've moved beyond the friend zone into genuine romantic territory. Now let's talk about the opposite scenario, because understanding what not to do is just as important as knowing what to look for. If you're on a first date or in the early stages of getting to know someone, and you immediately try to touch her lower back without building any rapport, comfort, or connection first, you're going to trigger her defensive mechanisms. She'll perceive you as invasive, presumptuous, or even creepy. The lower back touch only works as a signal and deepens attraction when there's already a foundation of mutual interest. This is why context matters so incredibly much. A gentle hand on the lower back while guiding her through a door after you've been talking and laughing for an hour sends a completely different message than doing the same thing within the first 5 minutes of meeting her. One says, "I'm confident and I'm reading your signals correctly." The other says, "I don't understand boundaries or social calibration." The fascinating thing about female psychology is how it differs from male psychology in this specific area. And understanding this difference will give you a massive advantage. Men tend to be much more open to physical touch earlier in interactions, especially from women they find attractive. We're wired differently when it comes to touch and intimacy, but women operate on what psychologists call progressive trust building. Each level of touch represents a new level of trust and comfort. A handshake is surface level. A touch on the arm during conversation is friendly but still relatively neutral. A hug can be friendly or romantic depending on duration and intensity. But the lower back? That's reserved for men who've passed through several filters of attraction, safety, and romantic potential. When you recognize this pattern, you can stop wasting time wondering where you stand and start reading the signals she's already sending you. Here's another real-world example that demonstrates how powerful this signal can be when you know what to look for. I was coaching a client named David who'd been dating a woman named Rachel for about 3 weeks. They'd gone on several dates, had great conversations, but David couldn't tell if she saw him as a potential boyfriend or just a friend she enjoyed hanging out with. Rachel had never explicitly stated her intentions, and David was too afraid to make a move and risk ruining the friendship if she wasn't interested romantically. I asked him one simple question. When you're together, does she let you touch her lower back? And if so, how does she respond? He thought about it for a moment, and then his eyes widened with realization. He told me about how just the previous evening they'd been walking through a parking lot, and he'd naturally placed his hand on her lower back to guide her between cars, and she'd immediately moved closer to him, grabbed his arm with her hand and smiled up at him. He'd been so focused on not making things awkward that he'd completely missed the signal she was sending. That weekend, he kissed her, and she told him she'd been waiting for him to make a move for the past 2 weeks. But let's go even deeper into the science, because when you understand the evolutionary psychology behind this, everything starts to make perfect sense. Anthropologists who study human mating behavior have discovered that the lower back has been a focal point of attraction across virtually every human culture throughout history. Why? Because the lower back and hip area in women is directly connected to fertility, health, and reproductive fitness. When a woman allows a man to touch this area, she's unconsciously signaling that she views him as a potential mate, not a threat. In ancestral environments, touch in this region would have only been permitted between bonded pairs or potential partners, because vulnerability in such an intimate area could mean danger from rivals or predators. Fast forward to modern times, and while we're no longer worried about saber-toothed tigers, that same psychological wiring remains embedded in female psychology. Another critical aspect of this that most men completely overlook is the reciprocity factor, and this is where you can really confirm whether her allowing the touch means what you think it means. Pay attention to what happens after you touch her lower back. Does she find reasons to touch you back? Does she create more opportunities for physical closeness? Does she position herself in ways that make it easier for you to maintain that contact? If the answer is yes to any of these questions, you're not just getting permission to touch her lower back, you're getting active encouragement. She's participating in the escalation of physical intimacy, which is one of the clearest green lights a woman can give without using words. On the flip side, if she allows the initial touch but then creates distance, doesn't reciprocate, or seems uncomfortable, that's feedback telling you to slow down and build more comfort first. Let me share one more powerful insight that ties all of this together, and this comes from relationship psychologist Dr. John Gottman's research on successful couples. He found that couples who maintain regular non-sexual physical touch in intimate zones like the lower back, shoulders, and face report significantly higher levels of relationship satisfaction and lower rates of breakup. Why? Because these touches serve as constant micro-communications of affection, desire, and connection. They're reminders that say, I choose you, I desire you, I'm here with you. When a woman first allows you into that intimate touch territory with her lower back, she's opening the door to that entire world of non-verbal communication. She's saying, you're no longer on the outside looking in, you're someone I'm willing to be vulnerable with. Now, before we wrap up, I want to give you some practical guidance on how to actually use this information in a way that's authentic, respectful, and effective. First, never make the lower back touch your opening move. Build rapport first. Make her laugh. Create emotional connection through conversation. Establish that baseline of comfort and attraction through eye contact, verbal banter, and appropriate lighter touches like on the arm or shoulder during conversation. Second, when the moment feels right, maybe you're walking together and need to guide her through a crowd, or you're standing close and the conversation has become more intimate. Place your hand gently on her lower back. Don't grab. Don't press hard. Don't linger awkwardly. It should feel natural and protective, not possessive or aggressive. Third, watch her response carefully. If she relaxes into it, that's your green light. If she tenses up or moves away, respect that boundary immediately and take a step back in the escalation process. Remember, this entire concept isn't about manipulation or forcing anything. It's about becoming fluent in the language of nonverbal communication that's already happening all around you. Women are constantly sending signals about their interest level, their comfort, and their attraction. Most men are so stuck in their heads, so worried about saying the right thing, that they completely miss these physical cues. When you start paying attention to whether she allows you into intimate touch zones like her lower back, you gain clarity that eliminates guesswork and prevents you from wasting time pursuing women who aren't interested, or, conversely, from missing opportunities with women who are. The lower back is just one piece of a much larger puzzle of female psychology and attraction. But it's an incredibly reliable piece that's backed by neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, and real-world observation. When you combine this knowledge with genuine confidence, authentic interest in her as a person, and respect for her boundaries, you become the kind of man that women naturally gravitate toward. You become someone who understands the unspoken rules of attraction. Someone who can read between the lines. Someone who makes women feel safe, desired, and understood without them having to spell everything out. So the next time you're with a woman you're interested in, pay attention. Notice how she responds to proximity, to casual touches, and specifically to whether she allows or encourages contact with her lower back. That single signal can tell you more about where you stand than hours of verbal conversation. It can save you from embarrassing misreads and empower you to move forward with confidence when the attraction is mutual. This is the difference between men who constantly wonder, does she like me? And men who know exactly where they stand because they're fluent in the language of female psychology. If this video opened your eyes to something you've been missing, if it gave you that aha moment where everything suddenly makes sense, do me a favor and smash that like button. Drop a comment below telling me about a time you noticed this signal but didn't realize what it meant until now. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because we're going to keep diving deep into the psychology of attraction, the unspoken rules of dating, and the signals that separate men who get it from men who don't. Knowledge is power, but only if you apply it. Go out there, pay attention to the signals, respect boundaries, and watch how your dating life transforms when you finally understand what women have been trying to tell you all along.